Hello and welcome to the webinar of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the IISS, on India-UK relations post-COVID and post-Brexit, hosted in collaboration with a leading Indian foreign policy and security think tank, the Vivekananda International Foundation. My name is Rahul Roy-Chaudhury. I'm the Senior Fellow for South Asia at the IISS in London. I'm delighted that the IISS as an international organization has an international audience for this webinar, with participants from the UK and India, as well as from Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, and the US. India and the UK have rhetorically claimed a comprehensive strategic partnership for the past 16 years. There has been considerable bilateral cooperation on investment and trade, technology and innovation, education and culture, diaspora links, climate change, and defense and security. Yet, the potential of the relationship continues to remain unfulfilled. We are here to discuss today whether this natural partnership between India and the UK can be reinvigorated in a post-Brexit and post-COVID world, and how this should take place in the next 2 to 3 years. The UK is currently undertaking an integrated review on foreign policy, defense, security, and international development that is widely expected to include a tilt for the first time towards the Indo-Pacific region, with a larger focus on India presumed. At the same time, India seeks to play a major role in the post-COVID-19 global economic recovery while seeking foreign investment. Can these new developments boost the India-UK relationship? Can the UK reclaim its position as one of India's top strategic partners? Can India become an influential partner for the UK in its post-Brexit scenarios? To discuss these issues, we have today a powerful panel of top diplomats and influential experts. Before I introduce the panel and provide some housekeeping rules, I would like to invite the Director General of the Vivekananda International Foundation, Dr. Arvind Gupta, a former Deputy National Security Advisor of India, to make his welcoming remarks. Dr. Arvind Gupta.
So I was thanking you for organizing this seminar, and VIF is happy to join the IISS for discussing in the next hour or so Indo-UK relations in the new context that you have just outlined. Last year we had, I think it was earlier this year, we had a similar seminar on maritime security, which is also, I think, was very useful. So it's great to have you and your team today to discuss some of these issues. I think there are several new opportunities which are opening up today. And firstly, the international environment has changed quite dramatically. COVID is raging and resurging, and it is having a deep impact on all of us, including on the geopolitics. That is one. Second is, I think, China has now, its aggressiveness and assertiveness has become very visible, that rule of law is under threat. So that's another point, I think, that needs to be looked at. And the third point is that today we have many new or pressing and urgent threats, particularly in the climate change and food security, water security, cyber security, etc. Now, all these areas, I think, are new areas which we can really explore for cooperation. Of course, we have had a wonderful cooperation so far. We have a strategic partnership. Over the years, a number of layers have been added to this. So it's a very widespread and a very deep partnership that we have, and you outlined some of these. But I think time has come to consolidate this partnership and also look for new areas. So I want to make two brief points. One is, in this new area, what are the areas that we should really be focusing on? As I said, today we are witnessing major changes, and in Europe, we are seeing Europe is in churn, and the Brexit is one of the most important developments. The outcome of Brexit and the implications of Brexit are still not clear. So I think India and UK can discuss the implications of Brexit and what new opportunities it provides us to consolidate our relationship further. And I think in the area of investment and trade, we can certainly do that. Our trade and investment, there is a lot of unfulfilled potential. That is the first. The second, I think, is maritime security. And IISS and VIF have discussed this issue earlier also. But today, with the developments in South China Sea and the increasing assertiveness of China, the growing interest of the UK in Indo-Pacific, India's Indo-Pacific policy, I think these are the provides a fresh background for us to really look at what we can do in the area of maritime security. The third is cybersecurity, which is something that is going to impact all of us. The UK has very strong cybersecurity capabilities, and so has India. Our agencies have also been cooperating. But I think we need to do something on the increasing the cooperation amongst the technical agencies of our two countries. So whether it is GSHQ and NTRO on our side or some other agencies, I think we should look at what we can do. India, as you know, has taken some important steps towards banning the Chinese apps, etc. So these are some of the areas I think that we can discuss. Another very important area for us could be the UN reforms. And I think Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee will speak about it, but I certainly want to flag it in my opening remarks because India would be joining the UN Security Council shortly. And the third and final point which I want to raise is about China. We have a very strong strategic partnership. And I think the potential of a strategic partnership should be used to signal to China that rule of law is important, and they cannot have this, what in Hindi we call manmani, or do what they please, whether it is in Ladakh or Hong Kong or South China Sea or Tibet or Xinjiang. I think it is very important that democracies should come together and do something about it. So these are the few areas I wanted to flag for consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta. I think it's very clear, as you mentioned, that it is now time to consolidate this partnership between India and the UK, and you've listed 4 or 5 issues that I'm sure we will discuss. Let me now invite our 4 panelists to provide introductory remarks of 7 to 8 minutes each. I've requested them to weave into their remarks one significant issue of India-UK cooperation that needs to be bolstered, and to identify one new or emerging opportunity that could make an impact on the bilateral strategic partnership in the next 2 to 3 years. This will be followed by a Q&A session. In order to ask a question to the panelists, please open the Q&A window as shown now on the screen. This will allow you to type a question in the chat function. I will then selectively convey the question or a group of similar questions to an individual panelist or the entire panel for a response. Please remember you can write your question at any time during the webinar, and please state your affiliation when doing so. As you all are aware, this session is on the record and will be posted in due course on the websites of the IISS and the VIF. Our first speaker today for the panel is Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson is the chairman of the Times Educational Supplement, TES Group. 2 months ago, he was appointed a member of the House of Lords. He was previously the Minister of State at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and the Department for Education And from 2005 to 2008, he was the Delhi-based South Asia bureau chief of the Financial Times, where he made many friends during his time there in India. Joe, the floor is yours.
Great. Good morning and good afternoon in India. And thank you, Rahul. Great to be here. And thanks for inviting me. You asked me to make a few comments on the relationship. And I think before we look forward, it's worth just looking back at what we've achieved over the last decade of the comprehensive strategic partnership. And I would agree with you that it has not fulfilled its potential, and indeed it's been underwhelming in important respects. And I'll just make a few key points to illustrate that. Ambassador Gupta just a moment ago mentioned the trade relationship. I think to start with that, prosperity sits at the heart of the UK-India relationship, according to our Foreign Office. And if you judge it by that yardstick, you can only say that there's been a relative disengagement of the UK and Indian economies. The UK is now India's 14th most important trading partner, having been 13th a decade ago when the coalition government came into power in the UK, and second in 1998, 1999. So that's a steady slide down the rankings of India's trading partners. And that's obviously very disappointing, given the importance that the incoming Conservative government attached to the relationship in 2010. I remember very well in July 2010, the euphoria with which the Cameron administration sort of announced big ambitions for the UK-India relationship. We said we were going to try and double our two-way trade between our two countries. By 2015, we were going to double it. Well, in fact, that didn't materialize, sadly, far from it. When you look at what's happened to our trade in dollar terms, it's increased a bit. By 2015, instead of doubling, it had increased by 20%. And today, compared to where we were a decade ago, we're up about 32% in dollar terms. Now, that's not disastrous, of course, but at a time when India's own economy has opened quite considerably to the world and its own trade has grown 3 times faster, it's actually a pretty disappointing relative performance for our two countries. I think clearly Brexit does present a big opportunity for us to do something about this. The onus is now very much on both countries to recognize that working for international trade agreements at Doha or up until now between the EU and India hasn't really been the trigger for a faster trade engagement. And there is now a chance to try something different and to turbocharge a direct bilateral negotiation. The government has said that Brexit will allow for a closer relationship with India. And if global Britain is going to mean anything, it's got to mean a closer trade relationship with India. And the government, in my view, should therefore prioritize trade talks with India and do more to expedite an eventual trade deal. So Rahul, sorry to start on a bit of a negative note. I have much more positive things to say now. I think what's been really positive about the relationship over the last decade has been the people-to-people ties, the so-called living bridge dimension of the comprehensive strategic partnership. And there, obviously, there was a huge amount to build on to begin with, starting, of course, with the 2 million diaspora and the rich tapestry of culture that we all enjoy in the UK, whether it's Anish Kapoor's exhibitions or the many Bollywood films that are on show in our cinemas around the country every evening. We have great opportunities to deepen the links between our young people and our academic communities in particular, especially through our universities. And I believe this is, for me, education and research and development partnerships represents the single biggest area of opportunity for our two countries. I'm really pleased that after a number of years of quite sharp decline, numbers of Indian students have been rising really quite steeply again in the last 2 or 3 years. We've just finished our university admissions cycle here in the UK, and I was delighted when I was looking at the UCAS website this morning to see that applications from India are up 23% to UK institutions this year, which is a fantastic thing to see after a period of time in the middle of the last decade when we were seeing really very steep declines. And a lot of this shift in sentiment has been the result of sensible policy change in the UK, namely things like the restoration of the post-study work visa, which is of such importance to many students around the world as they decide which country to come and study in overseas. But there is still a lot more to do on that front, and it's striking when I look at the stats on UCAS, how many more students we attract from China every year than we do from India. Looking at the numbers this morning, China is sending over 130,000 students to study in the UK, compared to only about 30 or so thousand Indian students. So there's a long way to go to achieve parity in that respect. Our institutions are, in some minds, insufficiently diversified in their international student body, with Chinese students representing 32% of non-UK domiciled students. Many of our higher education institutions are looking to diversify their international student bodies, and many will be looking to India to help them in that process. They shouldn't take Indian students for granted, of course. They've got to offer a world-class higher education. They've got to offer a very competitive post-study work regime. Many countries around the world will be competing for talented and globally mobile institutions. And it's important that the UK constantly keeps under review the competitiveness of its own higher education system and competitiveness of its own post-study work and visa offer. My third point, Rahul, relates to R&D. I think, again, there is a lot of potential, but when I look at the R&D relationship now between the UK and India, there's a very significant research collaboration gap between what we see at the moment and what the potential is for us to be doing together. At the moment, most of the UK's academic collaborations are with European countries through the Horizon programme and with other big science countries, the US, and increasingly with China. The rates of growth of our partnerships with Indian institutions has not really matched the growth of our relationships, research relationships with China. Research collaborations with China have increased by 120% or so since 2013, half that rate with India. So there's a lot more that we could be doing together. At the moment, we're only 17th in the rankings of, India is only 17th in the rankings of UK academic collaborators. And I think given the brilliance of Indian researchers and given the pace of academic, given the strength of Indian academia, there's no reason why that shouldn't be changing in the next few years. And I think it's an area that we should all be focusing on strongly. To facilitate that in terms of concrete policy suggestions, I do think there is a case for significant new investment in PhD programs for Indian nationals to come to the UK, matched potentially by new opportunities for UK students to study or undertake research at many of India's great higher education institutions. The two-way flow is very imbalanced at the moment, and we should put in place more opportunities for UK students to understand India, its worldview, and also to benefit from collaborations with its extraordinary science and research base. So lots to do in each of those three areas, Rahul.
Thank you very much, Joe Johnson. You've rightly pointed out the harsh realities of the bilateral trade and investment patterns in terms of the high expectations that both sides had. Equally important, I think you've highlighted the requirement for greater academic and research links, and I quite liked the term that you use, there's an R&D collaboration gap between India and the UK. Just to add for the audience and the panelists who may not be aware, that in terms of the restoration of the post-study work visa that you had mentioned, you played, I believe, influential role in ensuring that took place. Let me now turn to our next speaker, Gaitri Kumar. Her Excellency Gaitri Kumar is the High Commissioner of India to the UK. She arrived in London 3 months ago. She earlier served as Ambassador of India to the European Union, Belgium, and Luxembourg, previously as Additional Secretary to the President of India, and earlier as the Deputy Chief of Mission in France and the head of the Americas Division in the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. High Commissioner, the floor is yours.
A very good morning to you all, to this distinguished panel. It's a privilege to be here. And I think I would go straight to the subject to save time. And I really thank you for this opportunity to talk about India-UK relations in a post-COVID, post-Brexit world. To come straight to the point, I think I would take a cue from Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, who has stated that how any country relates to the UK would really depend on how the UK itself evolves. And I think that's a very relevant aspect, that because in today's world and fast changing and dynamic as it is, we have a we have our neighbors who are, China, which is asserting itself, America that's repositioning itself, fast changing dynamics and equations that have blurred the alignments and alliances, leading to unpredictability in international relations to a great extent. And all this has sharpened the relevance of effective global governance. Unexpectedly, Brexit, that we were all looking at, was compounded by unforeseen disruptor events that followed. As Mr. Johnson mentioned, the pandemic, the global economic crisis, and every country in the world has had to lock down, reflect, review, reboot, and reprioritize. Under these circumstances, the UK, like many affluent nations of the West, also one detail was that they became conscious of the need to bring back, or at least reshore, the critical manufacturing and services that had been very much offshored by the UK for decades. And in the post-Brexit COVID impacted situation, I would say the interesting development is that in a very objective assessment, it appears that India and the UK have found that we have unique complementarities in the most critical sectors, which means that there are many obvious opportunities. And let me also go back for a moment to remind everyone that India and the UK, with our shared history and well-established traditions and channels of cooperation, as well as shared values, we are both open and pluralistic societies. We are both committed to democracy, rule of law, a rules-based international order, revival and safeguarding and preservation of multilateralism, which is very important at this moment, and a rules-based international trade with WTO at its core. Now, all these make us both very natural partners. India will, from January 21, enter its two-year term at the UNSC. And as a founding member of the UN, we are fully committed to the principles and purposes of the UN Charter. And in London, as well as in New York and in Delhi, our governments will work together. We'll have the opportunity here again to address reform and safeguard and strengthen multilateralism. This would also be an opportunity to work more effectively for an international effort to address some of the issues that India thinks we must voice on behalf of the developing world. And then, of course, the scourge of international, the scourge of terrorism, for which the international community must work together. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, and Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Boris Johnson, have spoken about all these things in March 2020. In fact, they identified key pillars of our bilateral agenda going forward. They identified free trade as a priority, science and technology and space, defense, security cooperation, mobility, waste management. These are all areas where not only do we have our individual strengths, but also complementarities. For example, in the field of defense, they agreed that the time is right for co-development and co-production building on these strengths. And based on their conversation, both sides are now working together. We are discussing the next steps. A common agenda for economic recovery is a key priority. And in pursuance of their vision, our foreign ministers are leading our line ministries in developing the new agenda going forward. In fact, we are looking forward to the visit of Right Honorable Prime Minister Boris Johnson to India, hopefully early next year. I say hopefully because eventually it's the pandemic that would really have the last word. And that would be the kind of, his visit, the Honorable Prime Minister of UK's visit would be the kind of attention focusing event that usually makes teams on both sides work faster for deliverables and good outcomes and landmark sort of events. I'd mentioned that this is a moment in India-UK relations when we are potentially at the threshold of a new era. We, on our side, have prepared a kind of roadmap. The UK is undertaking an integrated review, as has been mentioned. It's a once-in-a-generation comprehensive evaluation of her foreign and trade policy, so it's a really important moment. Practically speaking, from my point of view here in London, it would be very worthwhile to wait for these processes to be complete. As strategic partners, India and the UK should ideally engage right now so that we can bring to the drawing board the perspective and aspirations of all the stakeholders on both sides. And as we know, there are many. Mr. Chaudhury had mentioned that we should identify the one big area. I must say that there was a discussion hosted by the British High Commission 2 weeks ago with very distinguished panelists, and they also conducted a survey. And in that survey, the outcome was that most participants felt that India and the UK should focus on manufacturing. So the question was, what should India and the UK focus on going forward? And the overwhelming majority said manufacturing. So I would, in this context, mention healthcare as a common and urgent priority. Having worked successfully together on medical supplies under the severest lockdown conditions. And I think our complementarities would again dictate urgent collaborative work to create jobs and capacities, modernization and upgradation on both sides through manufacture and supplies of medical equipment, IT support for the NHS, for example, providing the NHS human resources where we have a strength, creation of much needed infrastructure in the form of medical institutes in India, and of course, collaboration for the good of the world in developing an effective vaccine that's easily available to all, and also working for better preparedness for the eventuality of a future pandemic. Similarly, another priority for the UK, which takes the lead at COP26 we have positioned ourselves together to cooperate bilaterally and in the multilateral forum of the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. These again are areas where we could really bring everything together: science and technology, research, innovation, manufacturing, jobs on both sides. And here again, India's goal of self-reliance would help us to build capacities, capabilities, and contribute better to the global supply chain. Again, there is a potential of a win-win for both India and the UK here. And with private investment permitted in India's space sector, and UK being a leader in commercial projects in this field, we also have a company, an Indian company, Bharati Global, who has partnered with the UK partners to acquire OneWeb. So there are tremendous opportunities in the identified priority sectors. Trade, as has been mentioned by Mr. Johnson and by Mr. Arvind Gupta, sir, shows that it has been positive, on a positive trajectory. UK investors see India's market growing and becoming easier to navigate, and UK is the 6th largest inward investor in India, with a cumulative equity investment of about $28 billion from 2000 April to March 2020. And I must say that I have learned that Indian investors have not been deterred by any Brexit uncertainty. Our friends in the banks here say that the ecosystem here is something that they feel comfortable with. And our IT companies are really interested in coming forward to take up the opportunities that are presented by the new way of working, work from home, e-commerce, helping the education sector in the UK, the NHS, as I mentioned, and generally providing capacities at a time when the world is moving towards IT for living and working and functioning under the new norms. In the education sector, as well as fintech, our IT leaders are looking to make investments and acquisitions, and there is a high trust factor which they have well earned, and for that they would be very much welcomed across the board here. So India can deliver low-cost, high-volume services to the UK, making UK services and products more competitive. The new education policy, which has been mentioned, would attract students. It's bound to motivate inflows and build affinities and convert into linkages for mutual benefit in the long run. Again, trade has been mentioned. I must emphasize that our trade ministers are in an enhanced engagement mode. 5 tracks have been identified for intensive engagement to see if we can reduce barriers for enhanced trade flows. Our objective is an early harvest agreement conforming with WTO rules towards an eventual comprehensive trade agreement. And at the people-to-people level, there's much that we can do together, but I wanted to emphasize the importance of parliamentary exchanges to enhance mutual understanding between the representatives of our people. And I must say that within this short time, and just to limit myself to the time available, I would emphasize that we have a rich bilateral agenda and strong linkages through our active diaspora. And our think tanks are in close touch. Our track 1.5, track 2 dialogues must be invigorated to work towards grasping, seizing, and making a success of the new opportunities. The challenges right now, I actually would look at them as opportunities for the reasons that I've just given. We can, and therefore we must seize this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, High Commissioner. You've clearly focused on 2 or 3 key issues, including healthcare, manufacturing. Equally important, you've raised the prospect and the possibility, clearly, of the British Prime Minister's visit to India early next year, which could be key and significant in bolstering the strategic relationship as an attention-focusing event. Also, it was interesting that you mentioned a roadmap that India is developing in terms of its foreign policy, and the UK similarly is working on the integrated review. And you've actually suggested that it may be a good idea for both India and the UK to engage with each other on the sort of roadmaps that are being navigated. Let me now come to the third speaker, Her Excellency Jan Thompson. Jan Thompson is the Acting High Commissioner of the UK to India. She served as British Ambassador to the Czech Republic between 2013 and 2017, and then as Deputy High Commissioner to Canada prior to her arrival in New Delhi in August 2018. Between 2007 and 2010, Jan Thompson served as the UK's lead climate change negotiator, and in 2002 to 2005 headed the Foreign Office Department on Afghanistan in London. Acting High Commissioner Jan Thompson, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I have been having a few problems throughout this week with my technology, so there we are, but hopefully now audio is well, and it's really good to be here among such illustrious speakers. Really nice to see everyone. I think I'll be forward-looking and upbeat in my comments, but certainly from the UK government's perspective, we do see this as a moment of real strategic opportunity for the bilateral relationship. And Rahul, you were speaking at the beginning about the potential of the relationship being unfulfilled, and from what I heard of Arun Singh's comments as I came back on there, I think he thinks there is a good deal of room for improvement too. So perhaps we're all agreed on that. And in the UK, we have a government that will be around for a significant period of time now, with a very clear mandate that is very clearly exposed towards India, and sees India as one of its most important global relationships. I think we've spoken, I heard our speakers speaking about the integrated review that we're conducting this autumn of our international posture and policy and approaches. And I think India will come through as a very strong theme in that, as will the Indo-Pacific more broadly. And I think that that openness is really reciprocated. You also have a government that is very keen, from everything I see and hear, to take the relationship to another level and move it upwards. COVID has delayed this a bit, I would say, but it has also given it some new focus. So I think we are shooting at an open goal. It's ours to miss. And I'd highlight 3 areas to illustrate my point there. And I think you'll see a lot of overlap with the areas that other speakers have touched on, and also Ambassador Gaitri Kumar. So that's a good thing, I think, that we're all thinking in the same broad areas of opportunity. First of the 3 areas, I would say health. COVID-19 has obviously been challenging for everyone. We're all in it together. But India has certainly in recent months proved itself a really important partner to the UK. As Ambassador Gaitri was talking about, exports supplies, including the UK, when we had supplies running low of some drugs, also exports. It's amazing to see India ramp up and from an almost standing start become a major PP manufacturer. We know that India makes a quarter of the drugs used in our NHS, and has already and will have a critical role in vaccine production. Over half of the Gavi vaccines, Global Alliance vaccines, are manufactured in India. We were delighted that Prime Minister Modi participated in the UK's Gavi summit at the height of the crisis earlier this year, pledging money towards vaccine collaboration, distribution, And we've all become experts now on the various vaccine candidates. There are some in India, there are some, of course, in the UK, including in Oxford and Imperial College. We get much higher up with the Serum Institute in Pune here, in India, where we have the potential for a vaccine to be developed in the UK and manufactured in India and distributed to the world. So I have a lot of potential in that relationship. And while Joe Johnson was saying we underperform on research and development, that's probably true. There's certainly a lot more we can do and would like to. But the UK is India's second most important R&D partner. We are about £400 million will go into joint research next year. So I think there is already a lot going on, but obviously more we can do. And of course, all the people element on the health side too. Who knows the number of NHS staff of South Asian or Indian origin, and we hope many more will come as we make that easier through a new healthcare visa. So working together and innovating, putting health first of my three areas I would highlight of opportunity. Second one, we term building back better. So making sure the economic recovery is green. And you know, we bear in mind the pandemic is our current global challenge, but pre-existing one was climate. And after the pandemic is hopefully gone, climate will still be the big focus for us all. The UK is hosting COP26 next year now, not this year, delayed. But we are committed to increasing climate action, doing a huge amount on, we just had 2 months of coal-free power, leading on electric mobility, really trying to ramp up our climate effort and ramp up the effort that others are doing around the world. And part of our recovery package from COVID that we announced earlier this year was rooted in green jobs, making buildings greener and trying to make sure better. But that feels like also a priority for the Indian government and for Prime Minister Modi. It was great to see that India has been looking to maintain some momentum on climate action despite the crisis. We saw a solar auction in June, which set a record low tariff, and amazing to see the pace at which renewables, especially solar, are coming onto the grid here in India. And a huge 450 target for renewables announced by Prime Minister Modi, which everybody's focusing on and which we hope very much will be delivered. Ambassador Gaitri was talking about areas where we can collaborate closely there. We very much feel that. We are very pleased to have been the first co-chair of the Indian Initiative Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. That was opened up earlier this year. And we have now joined the Indian International Solar Alliance. Our two governments are putting money, co-investing into a green growth equity fund, trying to look at how we can leverage private sector investment to fund green growth projects. And we just recently saw BP committing £55 million to that green growth equity fund. So that is already working. And of course, beyond government, private companies here jumping on board with emissions targets. So it feels as if...
Actually, High Commissioner, you're breaking up. We can't hear you really very well. So let me sort of carry on with the session and bring you in later on, maybe in terms of the question answer part of it. Apologies for this, but it's difficult for us to hear properly. So, but I noted the two key points you mentioned in terms of health and climate cooperation, India and the UK, especially with the UK hosting COP26 next year. Arun Singh served as India's ambassador to the United States, France, and Israel in the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, and has been involved for nearly a decade in the formulation of Indian policy and implementation of India's policies related to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Ambassador Arun Singh, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Rahul. So I thought, based on my experience, and I would touch upon some of India's important relationships and to see how they have evolved, and then try and understand how those issues could impact on India-UK relations going ahead. Based on my experience, I would briefly refer to India's relations with Israel, France, the United States, and Russia. Now, many have described the India-Israel relationship as a very strong partnership, and which was started in 1992 with India finally recognizing the state of Israel. It was heavily focused on defense cooperation. And defense cooperation took off because the level of technology that Israel was able to offer was higher than the level of technology that was available to India from other Western countries and at competitive prices. Also, Israel was a reliable supplier because Israel did not have any relationship with Pakistan. And under US prodding, Israel was not really in a position to supply major defense equipment to China. So that provided sort of the context. And based on that, agriculture cooperation, investment partnership, technology partnerships increased in a major way. Now, from Israel, once we moved to France, looking at the European context, one would have normally thought that India's relations with the UK should be the strongest among the European countries. But as it turns out, the strongest strategic partnership that India has in Europe, it is with France, and even stronger than also Germany. And it started off as a difficult relationship given France's complex colonial history, the war in Algeria, action of France along with the UK and Israel against Egypt in 1956. But still an effort was initially made under President Mitterrand and Prime Minister Mrs. Gandhi to advance the relationship. Didn't make much progress. But once India did its nuclear tests in 1998, President Chirac and France saw a new opportunity as a major responsible power in the international context. France was the only permanent member of the UN Security Council that not only opposed any sanctions against India, but also did not criticize India. And the first strategic partnership that India established post its nuclear tests was at France. So if we look at three major strategic areas of cooperation, defense, civil nuclear, and space, France is India's strongest partner. Defense, because it is a reliable partner, it has quality equipment to offer. Nuclear, because France is the strongest in terms of its capacities in civil nuclear power in Europe and supplying more than 50% of its energy from nuclear sources. And then again, while other countries in Europe are active in space, the real action in space is headquartered in France and through the Ariane arrangement. So these are the areas where the India-France relationship advanced. And again, post-2001, after there was an attack on French engineers in Pakistan, France has not had much defense cooperation with Pakistan. And for some time, European countries have not been having any major defense cooperation with China. So recently, for example, when the French defense minister visited India, before the visit, they declared that India was the foremost partner for France in Asia. Now, I recall that when the Foreign Affairs Committee of the UK Parliament had debated and done a study related to India. At that time, a representative of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the UK had said that UK was not picking winners in Asia. So you can see the contrast. Now, if we go to the India-US relationship, again, the relationship has sort of gone up and down over the years since India became independent based on what was the particular US global priority at any point of time. And therefore, how did the bilateral relationship with India figure in the context of that priority? And again, within that priority, what was the US relationship with Pakistan? Was Pakistan an alliance partner? Was it an ally, part of military alliances? Was Pakistan a conduit through which US supplied weapons to militant jihad to drive Soviet Union out of Afghanistan? That provided another framework. Similarly, the US approach to China, because the US has seen India in a way since the 1950s, but in a more reinforced manner, I would say since about 2005, 2006, as a natural countervailing influence to the rise of China and the assertiveness of China in the Indo-Pacific region. So based on, in that framework, the India-US relationship has evolved. US is now a major defense supplier to India. US has declared India as a major defense partner. It has declared support for permanent membership of UN Security Council to India. And now we also have the growing size of the Indian origin diaspora in the United States, which now numbers more than 4 million. And it has increased two times since 2000. So it's a massive, rapid expansion taking place based on technology partnership in the information technology sector and related areas. And this diaspora is becoming active in US politics. Since 2016, we've had 5 members in US Congress of Indian origin. And now in the Biden-Harris ticket, the vice presidential nominee has partially of Indian heritage, which is a reflection that the Indian origin community is beginning to establish itself, not just economically, not just in the technology field, but also politically. And if you'd have seen, both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign have come out with specific messages and videos targeting the Indian American community, because it is felt that they could have swing vote capability in some states that are in play. Now, moving from there to the India-Russia relationship, clearly there's a huge legacy to the relationship because of political support that first the Soviet Union and then Russia provided to India on issues that mattered to it. For example, in the 1971 conflict that India had, it is a major and reliable supplier of defense equipment. It has emerged as a new energy partner with significant Indian investment in energy supplies in Russia, and again, political support on issues of interest to India. So I think once we see this context, it would perhaps be easier for us to try and visualize where the India-UK relationship could be headed. And one, as has been indicated, we have to first be clear on what is going to be the UK global role. And that is not clear, because the manner of UK's relationship with the EU is still being worked upon. What will be the role of global Britain, in relationship of global Britain with the United States? Will it completely align itself with the United States on all issues, or will it maintain some independence, some nuance? Because one of the reasons why the India-France relationship has evolved in a major way is because although France is part very much of the Western alliance framework, it also maintains independence of its policies vis-a-vis the United States. And therefore, from a perspective of a country like India, as it builds a closer relationship with the United States, closer relationship with the West in general, it would like also to have relations with countries that are somewhat independent in their choices from the United States. Because at some stage, if there is a disagreement, a difference with the United States on any issue, it needs partners that are more understanding and can be with India on those issues. So where would the United Kingdom be placed on this? And that, again, is not very clear. Also, we have a history of the UK not being very supportive of India on various issues. It was not supportive of India, for example, in the context of Jammu and Kashmir, when the matter was taken to the UN in the late 1940s. It has not been supportive of India in the context of Afghanistan, including in the post 9/11 period. It has, from the perception of people in India, it has not been effective in taking action against anti-India groups in the diaspora in the UK. For example, there were 2 attacks on the High Commission in the recent past, where the UK authorities either were not able to or did not thwart. On the subject of terrorism, UK has made a difference between global terrorists and local terrorists. And global terrorists are those who attack the West. Local terrorists are those who are attacking countries in the region. And it has not paid attention the same way to the challenge of local terrorists. And therefore, you know, many in India would argue that this is a somewhat self-serving approach. So I think looking ahead to advance the relationship, both India and the UK clearly need to figure out how they see their own roles in the international system, how they perceive the role of the other, and therefore what is the new opportunity for a relationship going ahead. So given this context, I think there are a few areas we could look at. I think there should be potential for cooperation in the Indian Ocean region, naval cooperation, because India has a strong presence, UK has a certain presence. I think there's a requirement for the UK to come out with a clearer position on the issue of terrorism and not make a distinction between global terrorists and local terrorists. I think democracy clearly provides a framework for us to work together. UK has to have a more, I think, as has been indicated, understanding approach on the issues related to immigration, high-skilled immigration. And I think India's membership in the UN Security Council starting 1st January 2021 should provide an opportunity to the 2 countries to see if they can work together a little more in the global context. And if they can identify 1 or 2 major issues where they can come together and lead a global initiative. For example, India and France have led a global initiative on the International Solar Alliance. So perhaps India and UK could look at something similar. So let me stop here, Rahul. I just wanted to flag the context in which perhaps the relationship will evolve and some issues that could be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think you raised an important issue, particularly in terms of how India and the UK look at the world. And once that is properly defined, they'll have a better sense of looking at each other. And you also raised some concerns that India has in relation to the UK relationship. We are quickly running out of time, so I want to start the question and answer session. And I want to do this by asking a question of my own. In fact, 2 questions which are related, but I'd really like all the panelists to answer the questions in 1 sentence each. And the questions are this. Though many of you have talked about the positive aspects of the relationship, I would like each of you to briefly, in a sentence, identify a single significant obstacle, challenge, or irritant, which is either current or emerging in the India-UK relationship that could harm the bilateral strategic partnership, and how would one overcome this obstacle? Let me start with Joe Johnson.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Rahul. Yeah, I mean, look, if I think there is, just turning to some of the areas that I was focusing on, namely on the people-to-people and research collaboration side, I think if there's one thing that would be helpful would be on the UK side to recognize that there's an inherent tension between wanting a deeper relationship with India and at the same time having a focus on reducing net migration. We need to recognize that tension and try and find a sensible way through it. And then on the Indian side, I think there are some fairly simple bureaucratic fixes that have been slowing progress for a long time. And to give you just one example, the difficulty that we've been having in terms of securing recognition of the equivalence of the 1-year master's program that our higher education institutions offer in the UK, we would be seeing a stronger flow and a more consistent flow of students from India seeking to do master's programs if they weren't then excluded from applying for India's fellowship system and teaching posts at Indian universities because their qualifications aren't recognized back home. So I think that's sort of one sort of fundamental issue I would bring to your attention, Rahul.
Thank you, Joe Johnson. High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar.
Thank you, Rahulji. I just wanted to say that, you know, in our business and especially for a High Commissioner in the UK, with whom we have a very, very comprehensive agenda, there may be occasional issues and challenging moments, but the opportunities and wherewithal far outweigh them. And as I had mentioned, we are embarking on a new era. We have a vibrant and rich dialogue. At this point, when we are working on the way forward, where both sides are well aware of the sensitivities and the minefields and the pitfalls that we'd like to address together, I feel that the architecture of our dialogue is actually geared towards this. And I'm confident that there is reason to believe that we can make our bilateral cooperation so fruitful that we'll be high achievers on our convergences in the global agenda as well. So I really don't think there's one, sorry to disappoint you, but I don't think there's one insurmountable, challenging problem.
A true diplomat, High Commissioner. And let me go on to Acting High Commissioner Jan Thompson, who's now coming to us through a phone line.
I'm going to say the kind of uncertainty of the world we're in right now, COVID, and the kind of trends it risks accelerating. I think it can go one of two ways. It can either push countries to turn inwards and define their interests really narrowly and put up barriers, or it can make them do the opposite and step up international cooperation and break down barriers. And so we need to make sure we do the latter. And really make the case for internationalism, albeit that domestic economies are suffering. I think India and the UK realise we're in an interconnected world and that we can't deliver economic growth and security on our own, and we need to work together. But there's always a risk there, and we just have to make sure we act as a force for good in the world.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Arun Singh.
Thank you, Rahul. Of course, there could be several issues, but one I would identify that a clear, undifferentiated position on the issue of terrorism and not allowing space within the UK for elements that challenge India's integrity.
Thank you. Let me now go to the broader discussion session. We've had several questions coming in, and let me select the first two that really focus on responses from Jan Thompson and Joe Johnson. Both these questions build on what the participants have talked about India-UK cooperation on multilateral aspects, especially in the UN. Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee, a former Deputy High Commissioner and Acting High Commissioner in the UK, has listed 4 areas where India and the UK could cooperate multilaterally in the UN. These are on the Yemen issue over the humanitarian crisis, South Sudan, where South Sudan and the UK and India are Commonwealth members, and on Iran, and as well as on Afghanistan, where he talks about the importance of the India and the UK cooperating to ensure that the development dimension of Afghanistan's socio-economic progress is sustained. Similarly, we have from Delhi again, Manish Tiwari, Congress member of the Indian Parliament or the Lok Sabha. His question that's related is, can India and the UK cooperate in reimagining the global order and the institutions of global governance so that they become concurrent to the 21st century rather than reflect the state of play 75 years ago? Let me turn to Jan Thompson and Joe Johnson for responses to this. Perhaps Jan can go first.
I would say on this, Rahul, that I mean the mandate of the UN multilateral institutions is pretty much the same today as it was years and years ago, 75 years ago, to take on tasks that nations can't do on their own. But obviously the world has changed, and multilateral institutions need to change to meet the challenges of a different world and different realities and different economic, political, demographic weights around the world. We, the UK, are long-standing supporters of reform to make multilateral institutions fit for purpose. I think we were the first P5 member to support a permanent UN Security Council seat for India. We were also the first G7 member to invite India to a G7, well, it was G8 summit then, back in 2005 at Gleneagles. And I think we do see a lot of opportunity now to work together. Partly we have next year, the UK chairs the G7, we have COP26, which I already talked about, India coming onto the Security Council, and then leading to its G20 presidency 2022. I think there's huge amount of overlap between our international priorities and a lot of scope together to work together on all of that.
Thank you. Joe Johnson.
I would echo what Jan has just said. I mean, the UK has been a long-standing advocate of reform of international organizations. An India that is rising and conscious of its new global responsibilities, can actively contribute towards the management of the global commons and public goods, and the UK has always been supportive of that, whether it's in the UN or a greater role in the governance of the Commonwealth Organization, for example. I completely agree with Jan.
Thank you. Let's move on quickly to a specific question for Joe Johnson and High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar. This is from Dr. Mukulika Banerjee, Professor of South Asian Studies at the London School of Economics. Mukulika writes that the new education policy of July 2020 allows foreign universities to set up campuses in India. Will the High Commission of India play a role in the UK in coordinating this interest in any way? I'd like to get responses from High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar and Joe Johnson as well. High Commissioner.
Rahulji, just wanted to say that yes, the short answer is yes. We do think that it is very vital to have scholarly exchanges, academic flows in both directions. When I say we, I mean both sides, India and the UK. And the young people connecting and then developing affinities, familiarity. I think that's very important for the eventual goal of working together in all the sectors, from manufacturing to trade to politics and to addressing the global solutions, the global issues. So yes, we will work together with our partners on that.
Thank you. Joe Johnson.
It's an exciting development to see some opening up of higher education to foreign universities in India. I think there are some sort of critical underpinnings for success, though, that need to be assured, in particular with respect to academic freedom. This will be a real touchstone for high quality institutions around the world contemplating having campuses in India, should that end up being allowed. They will need to be assured that their academics will be entirely free to pursue whatever research they want in a climate of complete academic freedom. That's really the sine qua non of successful cooperation globally in higher education.
Thank you very much. Let's move on quickly to a question that has come from Dr. Kate Sullivan de Estrada, Director of the Contemporary South Asia Studies Program at Oxford University. This is a question for all the panelists, but grateful for very brief answers from the panelists. The question is this: in the context of Brexit, the UK government has recently made clear its intention to break international law in a specific and limited way through the UK Internal Market Bill. How far do the panelists think that this intention will harm international confidence in the UK's commitment to a rules-based international order? Let me start with Jan Thompson, and then we can go to others.
Thank you, Rahul. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. We struck an agreement, the UK struck an agreement with the EU, finally balanced agreement. It's become clear that there are some issues around implementation of that agreement. The British government certainly remains committed to the negotiations to resolve the issues that are there, and I guess has tabled a bill to make sure there's a kind of safety net to protect the integrity of the UK should it be needed. But I think this will run a little bit, but I don't think it does impact in any way the UK's commitment to rules-based order. We've demonstrated it time and time again through our Magnitsky sanctions, commitment to freedom of navigation, terrorism work, investment in multilateral organizations, and of course as a permanent member of the Security Council. So I think rule of law is at the heart of what we do. I think this issue will get resolved, and it is a tricky one at the moment.
Thank you, Jen. Let me go directly to High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar, and then we'll go on to another question. High Commissioner.
Thank you. You know, as envoy in Brussels, I've been watching the process very, very carefully right from the very beginning. And the Brexit negotiations, the withdrawal agreement, all of which has gone through several ups and downs. I think we'll leave it to the legal and the technical experts to work it out. And we will work with the EU and the UK when everything is clear. So we are not going to be taking a view on a very developing situation. And I think we'll let it all finally come to rest with all the international sort of agreements and the internal part sorted out.
Thank you, High Commissioner. I have a question now from Dr. Sanjay Baru, formerly with the IISS, and earlier the media advisor to Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. Sanjay has two questions, but again, grateful for quick responses. The first question is, when will the UK reverse its tilt towards China and Pakistan and arrive at a more balanced relationship with India? And this, I think, I will relate to a question that has come from Tim Willsey, the international advisor at NatWest Bank and formerly with the Foreign Office. And the question in relation is, can the UK have close relations with both India and Pakistan at the same time? This is one part of the pair. The second question is, I think, again, broadly to the panel, is Boris Johnson has done some good, but is the bilateral relationship dependent only on Boris? What happens if there's a change of leadership? Let me ask Joe Johnson to come in first, and then we'll go quickly to the other panel members. Joe.
Well, I think wait for the integrated review, I think, is the easy answer, because I think that will give a clear direction for how Britain sees its place in the world post-Brexit. And it would be dangerous to get ahead of that. On the longevity of UK interests in India, I think this is something which is deep. It permeates our entire political culture. We want to see much closer relations with India in years ahead. It is going to be a really important country for Britain's future, and closer relations is an objective that's shared, across the system. It's not limited to Boris's support, powerful though that is. Thank you.
Jan Thompson.
I paused a moment on the tilting towards Pakistan. I think a lot of people in Pakistan would tell us we're tilting towards India. So I don't think I recognize that, but we certainly have very strong but different relationships with India and Pakistan. And having a strong relationship with Pakistan means we're also in a position to deliver frank messages in Islamabad, including on issues of core concern to India, including, for example, financing of terrorism and other areas. So that's what I'd say on that. And as well on the Boris Johnson question, it's true that we have a Prime Minister who's got very strong personal connection to India and wants to further the relationship. We also, by the way, have 3 senior Indian origin members of cabinet. But what is unique about the relationship is it's never about one individual. It's based on the thousands of connections, the living bridge, the people, the thought, the culture, the diaspora that we have been talking about. And it also, by the way, goes beyond party lines. We see across the political spectrum in the UK huge support for strengthening the relationship with India.
Thank you. Let me, we've gone over time. My sort of phone alarm was ringing just now. So let me really just quickly put across 2 other questions that I've selected. And if I can have quick responses from the panel, and then we will end the session. The first question, I'll put them together. The first question is from Dan Rycroft at the University of East Anglia, who asks, what can both governments do to make the value of this strategic partnership better known and more influential worldwide? For example, a new public diplomacy forum as a question. And Desmond Bowen, an associate fellow at the IISS, the South Asia program, asks, what can these great democracies learn together to improve their resilience at home, for health, and to address internal threats to security from authoritarian states? These are big questions, but I'd be immensely grateful if we could start in the reverse order and respond to both these questions. So let me start with Ambassador Arun Singh.
So Rahul, I'd just like to make one point. I think in the current context, the relationship would benefit if they could find a way to get into a very deep dialogue on issues related to China and the emergence of China in the global context. Because China is now establishing a growing presence in India's neighborhood, in the Indian Ocean region. And similarly, China has reached into Europe through the Arctic, through the Belt and Road Initiative, getting ports in Europe, and we have seen Chinese aggressive postures in the context of COVID. And China has split Europe in a sense through the 1+17 mechanism. So I think keeping all factors in mind, if India and the UK could find a way to get into a deeper dialogue on seeing this challenge to the international order, it would provide some advantage to the relationship.
Let me go on to High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar.
Thank you. I must say that it's occasions such as this where we can work together on sending out a united message and on the areas where we converge, and also what we are thinking of doing together bilaterally and in multilateral fora and for the good of the world. So public diplomacy, to answer that part of the question, I have really put this as a priority, reaching out to all the stakeholders in having a very high profile or a very prominent public diplomacy engagement here in London. And there are so many opportunities. I'm a little constrained by the COVID restrictions, but there's a huge potential. So we will work on that. And I think to answer the second part, our intensification of our bilateral dialogue will address and help us to really bring reform at the multilateral organizations once we are working together in the UNSC, for example. But as the previous speakers have said, we look forward to seeing the results and the outcome of the priorities in the integrated review of the UK, and we look forward to working with the UK on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Johnson.
Just to repeat, Rahul, I think the integrated review will underscore the centrality of India to Britain's view of the world and of all the ways in which we can work together in the interests of all our peoples. So I think this is going to be an important moment post-Brexit and post-COVID to take stock of the new world that we're all now in.
Thank you very much, Joe. We have to end this session now. It's been a hugely enriching session. Apologies for those of you whose questions could not be put to the panel due to a shortage of time. But clearly, the one thing I've learned from this session is that we need to have another similar session after the integrated review in the UK is published in autumn this year, to build on what we've just been discussing for the last hour and 20 minutes to take forward the bilateral relationship. And I think one key aspect that we never really touched upon as much as we could have for understandable reasons would be the issue that High Commissioner Gaitri Kumar raised also in terms of defense cooperation, manufacturing links between India and the UK, and other speakers mentioned particularly the maritime security cooperation in the Western Indian Ocean, which the IISS and the VIF have partnered in holding our first discussion on that issue. But to really end now, I just want to say from myself and from the IISS that this has been a hugely valuable exercise. for those of us at these institutes. And I expect this has been a valuable exercise for the practitioner community in both India and the UK, whose task is to chart the prospective relationship between these two natural partners. And also, I think, for the analyst community worldwide, whose task it is, like the IISS, to challenge official narratives through the provision of facts and evidence in order to improve government decision-making and public policy. Rest assured, the IISS will continue its series of policy-relevant discussions on the present and the future of India-UK relations. Finally, thank you to all of you who attended this virtual webinar. We had over 100 participants taking part, and an especially big round of virtual applause to our four panelists and the Director General of the VIF, Dr. Arvind Gupta, for the excellent contributions. Goodbye for now.